Greetings and welcome to the pod. My name is Mark West. Peter Hancock has now swum well over 1,000 consecutive days, most days in a dam in Armidale, central New South Wales. Often the temperature is down near freezing, but this is not the first time Pete has conquered an incredible swimming challenge. In 2014, he swam in 333 different locations in the 1 year, including in the 1.6 degree Fox Glacier River in New Zealand. As a freshwater ecologist, it's not just the swimming that Pete likes. There are plenty of things to look at. He has discovered new species of freshwater crustaceans and beetles, and documents much of it on his Instagram. Pete also recently completed an indoor Ironman, raising money for Headspace, so he knows how to run and cycle as well. I started by asking Pete, as always, if he's always been an ocean or inland rivers swimmer.
Pretty much. I still do swim in pools, but I much prefer sort of natural waters, and I've always lived inland, so I have a preference for rivers and lakes. The one time we did live on the coast, it was up in Cape York, so you couldn't swim in the ocean anyway because of the crocs and sharks and other things like that might kill you.
Yes.
But having said that, we've always gone to the Maroochydore, is sort of our traditional family holiday spot over Christmas, so we did a bit of swimming in the ocean there.
And nowadays you're swimming mostly inland and in dams. I don't think I've ever spoken to anybody that swims in dams very often. What's that like?
No, it's great. It takes a bit of getting used to if you're used to the ocean. The temperature drops to this winter it's down to about 6 or 7 degrees. It gets pretty cold, and you're less buoyant in fresh water too, so it's a bit harder to swim than in the ocean. But yeah, I enjoy it. You get to see a fair bit of wildlife, and I think that's probably what attracts me to it. The birds that you see. You don't see many fish in fresh water unless you're in a river or a narrow, smaller body of water. But there's certainly a lot of birds, a lot of other wildlife you see on the banks, like a lot of lizards and things.
Well, as an aquatic ecologist, that must be right up your alley then, really combining your interests.
It is, yeah, and I probably got into aquatic ecology largely because I enjoy the swimming. So I grew up sort of swimming in rivers and dams, and then when I went off to university, I was thinking of doing marine biology, but living inland, that was a bit difficult. So I went for freshwater ecology, and since I started working, it's really taken me to some pretty cool spots. And I always, whenever I'm doing some sampling, I always like to get in the water and actually have a look around at what's happening under the surface rather than just collecting fish samples in a net. I'd rather get in the water and actually do a bit of snorkeling and see what the fish are doing while they're sort of in their natural environment.
So you get to actually swim as part of your work as well.
Yeah, so maybe that makes me a professional swimmer.
That makes you a professional swimmer.
Yeah,
that's
we
right.
do. Yeah, but part of our work is to monitor fish populations and also aquatic invertebrate populations. And in rivers, you can get fairly close to fish without spooking them. And in some cases, for example, some catfish, the eel-tailed catfish, can be quite curious, and they'll come up and they'll follow you around like little puppy dogs, because if you're snorkeling, your fins are kicking up sediment and invertebrates off the bottom of the river, and the catfish come along and they'll eat the little bugs that you pick up. And things like eels are pretty curious as well. So they can actually be a bit spooky if you're snorkeling at night time, which is the best time to get in the water for aquatic, or for a lot of freshwater species, because they are nocturnal. The eels will come up to you and just have a bit of a look at you. And I've never been attacked before, but they just sort of come out of the darkness at you, and it can be a bit spooky.
Are they interested in attacking you, or are they those sorts of creatures?
No, I haven't heard of anyone being bitten. They do, I suppose, apart from fishermen, or if you've got them hooked. I've heard of fishermen trying to get their hook out and they've been bitten. But generally with eels, they'll have a look at you, and then they'll just they might come close because they've got pretty bad eyesight, and then they'll just sort of turn around. Once they realise what you are, they'll turn around and head back into the bank or off to some sort of other shelter under a log. But there's not many freshwater fish that will attack you. We do have bull rout, which are freshwater stonefish, and probably a dozen people every year might step on a bull rout and have to go to hospital because they're being a stonefish. They do have venomous spines that can cause a fair bit of damage.
That I've never actually heard of freshwater stonefish. Are they across Australia, or are they kind of more on the east coast where we are?
Yeah, east coast rivers. So a lot of the Hastings River, near Port Macquarie, or near Wauchope in the freshwater reaches, Bellinger River. A lot of the north coast rivers have them.
And you're famous. I've seen you in the paper. That makes you famous. You've swum 1,000 consecutive days in a row. A lot of these were in Armidale, in the Dumaresque Dam in Armidale.
Jumeric Dam.
Jumeric, okay.
That's Jumeric. Yeah, that's one of our local. Well, that used to be a town water supply 100 years ago. It was probably 120 years ago they finished building it, and now it's just a recreation reserve. And it's interesting. Up until recently, I was the only one who used to go out there swimming regularly, but with COVID last year closing a lot of the indoor swimming pools down, a lot of the mates who I swim with, they actually came out and had a swim with me, and then they've kept swimming through winter, and they've kept going. So it's been really good getting a lot more people out there.
That's pretty brisk in the middle of winter in Armidale.
Yeah, I'm actually now up to about 2,700 days. So I've kept that swimming streak going.
Oh wow!
Just because.
Well, why not? Yeah.
Gives me something to do. Yeah.
What's your minimum criteria? Do you just have to get in and get out, or do you have to swim a kilometre? How do you motivate yourself if you're not feeling very well?
Well, I used to make it 2.5 Ks. It used to be my thing that I'd call a swim, but now I've become a bit more casual, so I'll get in. The minimum criteria, I suppose, is probably I need to probably be completely buoyant, because I also try and swim in as many different types of water bodies as I can, and sometimes they're only fairly small for farm dams, so they're not very long and not very deep. But so my minimum criteria would be swimming at least a couple of 100 metres and being completely able to float, and also we've got to be able to go underwater, because I like to have a look underwater and see what's around.
In Speedos the whole time?
Yeah, occasionally I'll wear wetsuit. I have softened a bit over the years. I never used to, until probably last year. I didn't wear wetsuits, although except when I went to New Zealand or when I was diving or something like that. But I prefer no wetsuits because even when it's cold, I find my hands. If you're swimming a kilometre in 6 or 7 degree water, even if you've got a wetsuit on, you lose the function of your hands, and I find it really hard to pull a wetsuit off if you've got numb hands, or you lose your dexterity, so you can't undo the zips. It's often just better to go in and suffer the cold, then get out, and then suffer the after drop, which is the bit where you really start to shiver and cool down.
Do you have a
following
favourite?
a swim.
Do you have a favourite place in inland New South Wales, or anywhere really, to swim?
I like Generic Dam, but I've done a fair few swimming trips over to New Zealand, and there's a place called Blue Pools near Wanaka, which is on the South Island, and it's just a really clear stream that flows out of a rocky gorge, and I've swum up that rocky gorge a bit, as much as you can when the river's flowing. You're swimming against the current, and it can be quite hard to make distance upstream, but once you get upstream, then I just like to turn around and ride the currents back, and you see big trout and other invertebrates, things like stoneflies and mayflies on the bottom. But again, in New Zealand, Lake Hiroko is one of my favourites as well. It's I don't know if I'm saying it right, but it's the deepest lake in New Zealand. It's in the Fjordland region. Again, clear water, pretty cold, but surrounded by beautiful vegetation. There's heaps. In Australia, I like a lot of the snowy mountain lakes, because they're clear. Tasmania is good. I've swum a bit in the Kimberley as well, or in the Pilbara region. So, yeah, I don't know. There's so many nice spots in inland Australia, and even there's the Barwon River and those big muddy rivers in inland Australia. They're just different to any of the coastal rivers that we've got. Just that they have different biota. They've got big river mussels that can be, 15 centimetres long, and you can't really do much snorkeling in those rivers because they're too turbid, but you can dive down and you can feel in the mud and find the invertebrates or the mussels in the mud.
What's the cleanliness like? I mean, you hear of algal blooms and such things in the rivers. Is it relatively safe to swim in the majority of rivers?
I would say the main risk you have is bacteria. So in high density agricultural areas, for example, you can get fecal coliforms, and it washed into the river after rain. So swimming after rain, it's like in the coastal areas. Swimming after rain is potentially less safe than swimming, when there hasn't been rain, because things wash into creeks and rivers, and they can increase the turbidity and make it a bit more dangerous. So the main health risks are the bacteria in inland rivers. But having said that, I haven't really been sick from swimming, and apart from once I swam in Portugal and I got a bacterial infection in the Tagus River over there. That it didn't put me in hospital or anything, but it made me feel pretty crook.
In New Zealand, you swam in a glacier river, the Fox Glacier River, at less than 2 degrees. That would have been some experience. Was that still in Speedos as well?
Yeah, it was. It was actually I went over there with a mate, and we were getting ready to go for a swim, and we were getting hammered by sandflies. So it was actually a relief to get in the water and get away from those sandflies. But I did 2 swims in that. Oh no, three swims in that lake. It's a big lake downstream of a glacier, and it's in the foothills of Mount Cook. And it's got icebergs in it because the icebergs come off the front of the glacier and then they just drift along this lake, which is several kilometres long. And where we got in was about halfway along the lake, and we swam around a couple of little icebergs and then back to the shore. It's pretty cool. One of the icebergs had a hole in it, so I was able to climb up and sort of go like a seal through the hole in the middle of the iceberg.
How long did you need to train your body to be able to deal with that sort of temperature?
Before that, I'd been swimming in sort of 4-degree water. So I was, and I'd been doing cold water swimming on and off for years. So I think it's more of a psychological thing. If your head knows what to expect, then you're able to compensate for the cold water just by having a bit more control over how you respond once you get in. Because the dangerous thing with cold water is people get in and they gasp and they take in water or their body goes into shock. The bloke who I went over and did the swim with, he hadn't acclimatised to the cold water, but he was able to get in for a couple of, or probably a minute or 2 minutes, and have a bit of a swim, and then get out and get dressed.
How long were you in for?
Probably 10-ish minutes, or maybe 12 minutes for one. I did 3 different swims, and they probably would have been between 10 and 12 minutes. And I tend to limit my stay in cold waters because it's actually when you get out that it becomes a bit more dangerous. If you stay in too long, you don't actually feel too cold when you're swimming. It's when you get out and you stand up and the cold blood on the extremities of your body returns to the core of your body, and that's when you start to get cool.
Yeah, so
you start to shiver.
You were okay after those swims?
Yeah, we shivered a bit, but then we had to climb back up out of the lake because the lake shores are fairly steep, and they rise up maybe 50 or 60 metres up to the top, and then you're climbing over rocky terrain deposited by the glacier.
Right.
So you warm up as you're getting out, as you're getting out of the lake.
Yeah, I hope your feet and your hands aren't numb.
No, they were all right.
That's amazing. Are you tempted by, things like the ice mile or that sort of extreme end of cold water swimming?
Yeah. The ice mile is interesting. I had more of an interest a couple of years ago. I was more keen to try it, but I didn't. I wasn't in an area where it was getting down to below 5 degrees, and I didn't have the resources to go off chasing 5-degree water. But I've heard there's been a few people who have done it this year in Canberra. But I think if I was in a situation where I did have that water available to me, I'd have a go at it.
In 2014, you swam in 333 different locations just in the 1 year. How did you find 333 different locations?
It was fun. That was one of my New Zealand trips. I did I think 50 spots in New Zealand, and then that was early in the year, and then I came home and I thought, I might just see how many I can swim, how many different spots I could swim. And I'd go to different places for work, but I'd also, on the weekends, I took the kids off to different places for swims, and Google Earth helps. I explored around Armidale. I've probably hit more than 120 spots within 150 k's of Armidale.
Wow.
But we're lucky up here because we're not too far from the coast. We get down to Coffs Harbour, and there's a lot of subtropical rivers on the north coast that are quite nice to swim in. But I also in that year I tried to get as much variety as I could. So I swam in swamps, lakes, rivers, inland rivers, ball baths, like artesian ball water bubbles up to the surface, and there's a few artesian baths out. Well, there's Moree, which is at the town swimming pool, is fed by artesian water, but there's also a ball bath out at Pilliga and Burren Junction, and the water, and Lightning Ridge. Lightning Ridge, the water's about 38 degrees.
Oh, wow.
So it's really, we used to go out there in winter and we'd do a ball bath tour of Western New South Wales, and we'd go to all these warm water, and the outside temperature at night time can get down to 0 degrees, but if you're in these 38-degree water and lying back and looking up at the stars, it's really nice.
Amazing. How big are those baths?
The one in Lightning Ridge, it's sort of a circular concrete-lined, it's almost like a submerged water tank, and it's a diameter of about 15 metres, I think. I'm not sure exactly, but 15 or 20 metres. And a lot of the locals out there come in early in the morning at about 4:30 or 5 o'clock, and they'll have a soak, and they sit in there talking, planning their day and catching up with each other. So it's a little bit of a community thing. And then a bit later in the morning, the tourists come and they'll have a chat and sit down and talk about where they've been and what they've seen. So, the ball baths are really nice.
We so often hear about the community aspects of the swimming. Do you mentioned you've got some local friends that you swim with in Armidale. Is that a regular thing?
Yeah, it is. Well, they go out to the dam, out to Generic Dam, maybe 3 or 4 times a week. There's about 18 of them. So it's grown over the last 18 months or 20 months since COVID. It's grown from a couple of people to about 18 now, and not everyone turns up. You might get 2 or 3 in the morning, one morning, and then 3 or 4 the next morning. But yeah, they really taken it on board. They're really enthusiastic, and it's good to see. They've also started branching out and not just swimming in Generic Dam, but going on little weekend trips to some of the local waterfalls near here. And one of them at the moment is a doctor, and he's up in North Queensland sending us all photos of tropical rivers and lakes that he's swimming in.
Well, there used to be an
So,
organised.
yeah, it's great.
Well, there used to be an organised swim at Copeton Dam, I noticed. Did you ever do that one?
Yeah, I did that. I did that. I don't know, for all the years it was running. I think it was 3 or 4, maybe. I did the 5K swim,
That would have been
and
great.
yeah, it was good too. Yeah, I go out to Copeton a bit and swim, and I'm half thinking about doing a big swim out there at the end of this year. I've never swum 30 k's before, so I thought I might go and try that in November or December.
Wow. So the dam's big enough for you to swim 30 k's without too much hassle.
If it fills,
Right.
if it fills, it's filling up at the moment because we're getting a fair bit of rain. But it's about 10 kilometres from one end to the other, and then I was just thinking of swimming around it.
Yep.
I've run around it when the water's been low, and that's about 60 k's around the outside if you go in all the bays and follow the water. But when the water level comes up, it smooths out a lot of the little bays and makes the shoreline a bit less convoluted.
That would be an amazing swim. What's the furthest you've swum before?
25 k's, and that was on my 2,500th day. I did that.
Cool.
But that was in a swimming pool, and I did it. I swam for 2 k's, and then I had stopped and had something to eat. Then I swam for another 2 k's. So I broke it up really into 2k increments.
Yep.
So it's the longest I've swum continuously would be a 10k swim without stopping.
So would this be 30k on your 3,000th day?
I'm not sure. I don't think so. I haven't worked out when the 3,000th day is. But I'm up to about 2,700 now. So yeah, it'll be next year sometime.
Might be, yeah. Well, you're talking about running around the dam as well. So you're an athlete of some regard. I've seen your Strava. You're amazing with your runs and your swims. And you were telling me that you're doing an indoor Ironman next week. So where have your adventures taken you? Where are you going with your runs now?
Well, runnings usually lead to a swimming spot. So I always like to include a swim in my runs. Even if I'm doing a race, I'll stop and have a swim, or I'll either swim at the start or swim at the end. But running is good. I do a lot more ultra marathon distance runs. So 100 k's are good. I'm hoping to do my first 100-mile run next year in February in New Zealand.
Wow.
There's a run called Tarawera Ultra Marathon, and it's 100 miles, 160 k's. And in that, you've got to get from at one point you've got to get from one side of a lake to another side of a lake. and there's a boat crossing, so you get on the boat and they paddle you across. And I emailed the organisers to see if I could swim it, but they wouldn't allow that. You got to take the boat, so I'll have to get my swim in somewhere along the way.
That would be an amazing trip. So have you done Ironman events as well? Is cycling part of your repertoire?
No, I've picked up cycling at the beginning of last year. I entered a half Ironman distance triathlon at Huskisson.
Mm-hmm.
And that was sort of that was my first triathlon, actually. I hadn't even really done triathlon before then. So, and I really enjoyed it. Just having the swim, and then the ride was probably my least strongest leg. But it was a really nice course. It was flat and very scenic. And then, the run was the same. It was a scenic run as well. It was pretty hot, though, that run. But since then, I've done another. I did the Tweed Enduro. I have done Ironman distance events, but they've just been self-styled adventures.
Yep.
That I did, again, with a mate. So we've got, in Armidale, there's a run called the Juval Dam Buster, which is, it starts at Jumeric Dam, where I swim, and then behind Jumeric Dam there's a mountain called Mount Juval that rises about 400 metres above the dam. So you run up that twice to do 30 Ks, and that's the Dam Buster long run. But last year, a mate and I decided to turn it into an Ironman, so we ran up Juval 3 times, and then we swam 4 Ks in the dam, and then we rode 180 Ks around Armidale out to, there's a few nice little scenic churches around Armidale, so we went out and visited those, and then came back and finished at the dam.
That's amazing.
And we'll probably do that this year. We'll do that again this year, I think. Although this year the Dam Buster Trail Run has a 50K event, so they've got approval to add a 50K event onto the 30K. So we'll do the 50K and then probably swim and ride again.
That sounds amazing. And for someone that's just picked up bike riding, that you say 180K is not too shabby, really.
Yeah, well, I've been doing it for maybe a year and a half, but I wax and wane with the bike riding, because usually if I'm training for a big run, then I'll focus on the running more than the riding, or if I'm focusing on a swim, I'll focus on, the bike's the first thing that I leave
Yep.
behind, because I prefer running and swimming to riding. But I have actually just entered my first bike-only race, which is a 100K gravel bike ride at Tenterfield next month.
Fantastic.
So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
I don't ever go in these things to win them. It's just more to have fun and enjoy the atmosphere.
That's actually what I was just about to ask you. How competitive you are you? Because it sounds like you do this for fun, not necessarily to win. Although I'm sure winning is lovely, but
well, I used to I did a lot of ocean swimming a few years ago before COVID, and I used to get a position in the age group category. Never first, usually second or third. And I did the Southwest Rocks Marathon a few weeks ago, and I got second in that. So that's the first time I've ever won a prize for running.
fantastic.
And that was a bit of an exception. I just thought, I might see how I can go in it if I try to run fast, and I finished the marathon in 3 hours 35 minutes. So
That's pretty quick.
which is faster than what I thought I could do it. But then we have, again, some mates and I, we have a winter solstice tradition. So the week after the marathon, a mate and I did a 100k run in the national parks around Armidale. We started at Cathedral Rocks, which is the highest part on the northern tablelands, and then we ran down the side of the Great Dividing Range to the Bellinger River, had a bit of a swim, and then ran back up. Well, not really ran, but hiked back up, and finished at about 1 or 2 in the morning. It was a big day.
That's a massive day.
We saw some pretty cool stuff. Like we saw a koala on the side of the road or on the side of the track in an area that had previously been burnt by bushfires, because we've got some pretty serious bushfires up here in 2019 or early 2020. So it was good to actually see the koala in an area which had been burnt. And it's a good sign that things are recovering to some extent. They'll probably never come back to what they were, but they are recovering to some extent.
What about our inland rivers and lakes? You hear a lot about. I mean, we talked a little bit about whether they were safe or not to swim in, but you hear a lot about the fish kills and then the rivers drying up. And I guess as part of your job, you must look at all that sort of thing. How are we looking in New South Wales?
Oh, it is a bit of a sad story, I think, in a lot of, especially in inland areas, but also on the coastal areas. I did a lot of early work in the late 90s on the Hunter River, and I remember it used to be fairly clear around the Hunter, and then we had drought, and then a bit of rainfall, and since then that's really, the river seems to be really turbid. It's not as clear as it used to be. And there are a whole heap of factors, I think, that contribute to that. So, and fish in inland rivers, fish populations seem to be on the decline. Native fish seem to be on the decline too. They're just battling against so many factors, river regulation, the agriculture, the water extraction. There's so many factors that contribute to the declining ecological communities out there.
Yeah, if there was an easy solution, we would have employed it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but there's so many. There's a lot of competing demands for the water. That's what it all comes down to, and the environment is just one of those aspects.
Yeah, and a warming climate doesn't help either.
No, that's right, and things are becoming more and more erratic. So you get a couple of years of drought, and that removes a lot of the vegetation off the land, and then you get a big dump of rain, and it washes a lot of that soil, that bare soil, into the rivers, and creates problems with turbidity and low dissolved oxygen, as well as any other contaminants that might be in the soil.
And where would you like to swim? You've swum in so many places. Are there any destinations left that you want to go to?
I'd love to go to Canada. I've never been to Canada, and you hear a lot about their rivers and that they've got so many lakes up there, cold water lakes. I'd love to go to Antarctica.
Yes.
I don't know about doing the Channel, the English Channel. I suppose it would be a good thing to do. I've got a mate actually he's out of Broken Hill, and he's training for the Channel at the moment. He swims. He's got a big property out there, and he backs onto one of the Menindee lakes, and he swims out there for kilometres. Just getting used to the distance. There's lots of places I'd like to swim.
Oh, that's so good. What about in have you been over to like West? You talked about the Pilbara before, so I guess you've been over to Western Australia.
Yeah. I've done. I wouldn't mind doing Rottnest actually. That's one swim that'd be good.
Yep.
I've done a fair bit in the south-western corner around Albany and Bunbury. A bit of swimming off Perth. End up around Newman.
Yep.
in the Pilbara. Kununurra, a few spots out there.
Oh, that's very
And then
interesting.
we went across to the Northern Territory up to Darwin, and there's lots of little spots up there too. Litchfield National Park.
I guess a lot of the mining companies across WA would be interested in speaking to you about their effects on the waterways.
Yeah, well, a lot of the work when I was over there was for the mines, not specifically surface water ecology, but groundwater ecology. That's another area that I work in. We sample the subterranean aquifers, and they've often got little invertebrates in it, little blind white crustaceans that are extremely interesting. I think they pretty much look like little prawns, but they're blind, and they've got no pigments in their body, so they're either see-through or they're white, and they live in the sort of the gaps between the sand grains in river aquifers, but they also live in the cracks in rock aquifers. They live in the cracks and in the solute cavities in limestone aquifers.
Oh, how interesting!
Mm.
Now you can find little crustacean-y things everywhere, can't you?
Yeah, that's right. There's a group of crustaceans called copepods, and they seem to be all over the place. There's unique species that live in rainforest trees,
Right.
in the hollows made between branches up in the crown of the trees, and they just get around from birds, or some of them have desiccation-resistant eggs, so they're able to, when a river or a billabong dries out, these eggs are able to survive in dried stages, and they can get blown around by the wind, and they're very interesting things.
I read something recently, slightly diverging, about crab shapes and crustacean shapes, and how often evolution has made them independently of each other, like a lot of times, so many more times than you would expect. It was fascinating.
Yeah, crustaceans are a very diverse group. They, I think there's more known species of crustacean than there are of insects. But when you think of it, a lot of the invertebrates in the ocean are crustaceans. The ocean doesn't have many insects. It's dominated by crustaceans. And freshwater and groundwater are other areas where crustaceans are fairly common.
Oh, given they live out of sight, I imagine there's that many again to still find. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, that's right. with the groundwater stuff, almost every time we've sampled, we've found new species. So that's pretty cool.
That is cool. Do you get to name them?
I've named a few. There's a groundwater beetle that I've named after my daughter, and my son also has a little crustacean named after him.
Oh, that's good. You just want to hope that they don't end up being some horrible terrors that do something horrible to the world once you breed them up and let them loose on the world.
Yeah, well, the little crustaceans, they actually do look like something out of Alien. Some of them have big claws out the front that almost look like praying mantis type arms, and they have spines coming off their back and legs, and they look quite vicious. And they probably are, because they're living in the groundwater. There's not a lot of food for them, so they have to pretty much eat what they can get. So they'll eat. They're quite good hunters, even though they're blind. They feel their way through the sediments, and they're able to detect other invertebrates and things in the aquifers as well, and they're able to track them down.
Oh, that is so cool. Your kids are going to really thank you for that. And so what's next then? What's your next challenge? Is it to just reach as many swims as you can, or have you got any big bucket list in mind for now?
Oh, I haven't. I'll keep COVID's really sort of kept. It means I keep my goals sort of local. I've got that. There's an indoor Ironman thing that I mentioned earlier. That's coming up next week, hopefully, if COVID restrictions don't mean that the rest of New South Wales gets shut down. The original plan was to swim in the pool, then ride 180 k's on a bike trainer on Zwift, which is like Zwift is an app that you can fit your electronic trainer up to, and you ride through a landscape. And if you're going up a hill on the computer screen, then you actually pedaling gets harder. It sort of simulates real world situations, and you can ride with other people. So people in America can join in and ride with you online. I'm not an expert on Zwift. I've only actually used it 2 or 3 times, but I'm planning to use it on this Ironman just to make it a bit more interesting and as a way of measuring distance. And then after the bike ride, we're going to run 42 k's on a treadmill. But with COVID restrictions as they are in Armidale, to do that inside we have to wear a mask, and that would make it pretty hard. So we've come up with a plan B, which is to move the trainer outside, and it's still called an indoor Ironman, but we're actually outside, so we don't have to wear masks.
Well, that still counts.
But we're still restricted. We're not running through the landscape, enjoying the scenery. We're just sort of slogging it out.
That's going to be interesting.
On a treadmill. Yeah. Yeah, well, that's half the point, I think, is the psychological challenge of it.
Yep.
Because it's going to be pretty tough. And we're raising money for Headspace too, which is it's an organisation that helps young people with mental health problems. And the local Headspace office is going to come along, and they'll have a tent set up, and hopefully we'll get some people involved in the Ironman event. We're doing it at the local university, has a sports union here, and they were hoping to get a few people on separate treadmills or on exercise bikes and doing little sections of the Ironman along with us, just for fun.
What do you think about when you're doing these super endurance events?
Lots of things and not much.
Yeah.
Often I'll switch off and just run through, or swim through the landscape, and other times I'll be looking around, trying to identify the different birds you see or hear. It's a hard one. I listen to podcasts a lot, or audio books.
Yeah.
Although if I'm doing a race, I tend to just not listen to anything and just enjoy the conversations that you have when you're running.
Yep.
You also think about work. We come up with new challenges to do. That's a big one.
Yeah.
There's one bloke I ride with in particular, and every time we come back from a ride, we've got a list of about 3 or 4 different things that we want to do. So we just add them to the list.
Yeah.
And sometimes the ideas we come up with come to fruition. Other times they just drop off and disappear, or we'll come back to them and refine them and come up with another challenge. So most of my running and swimming is not really event-based. It's not really organised events. It's for us just coming up with adventure ideas and seeing how they work out.
That there can't be too many people as fit as you to be able to do these events. How big is your crew?
There's me. There's probably about 2 or 3 long distance runners who I run with regularly. On our winter solstice challenge, there's a group of 2 other people and 2 other blokes and I who've done it every year. And then the swimming group, there's the 18 members of the high cows, they're called, high country open water swimmers. But of them, there's probably 3 or 4 that do longer distance swimming. Most of them, they'll do a couple of Ks and just try different types of water, different lakes and different. They do the Coffs Harbour Ocean Swim every year, which is I think it's 2 Ks or 2.5 Ks in Coffs Harbour, and they'll go off to Byron Bay and do the ocean swim up there. And cycling, there's maybe only 1 or 2 other people who I ride with. Last year I started doing Audaxes, which are, they're not really races, they're just rides that people do, and someone will put a map up and you'll have a card and a list of tasks. So you might have to go to a cafe and get a receipt from that cafe as evidence that you've been there. And the rides might be 200 Ks long. And on the ride you might have 4 or 5 different tasks that you have to complete. And then you come back and present your card and it gets authenticated. And then you get an official time and all that. So that's just a bit of fun, really, more than a race.
Oh, that's very cool, though.
Yeah, it's just good having a base level of fitness. It just opens up a whole heap of doors on what you can do. So I try to do a marathon. I've been doing a marathon a month, but often I'll do more than one, just to maintain my endurance fitness. And I'll swim every day at differing lengths. These days, most of my swims are about a K, but occasionally I'll do 3 or 4, and then probably in the end of August or the beginning of September, I'll start ramping up my swim distance a bit in the lead up to the Copeton swim.
Wow. Do you get any sleep? There's not many hours left in the day.
I really struggle. I've always had trouble sleeping. So I do love it though. Sleep's my favourite thing. But I usually get up at 4 or 5. Sometimes if I'm having trouble sleeping, I used to just get up at 1 o'clock and I'd go out to the dam and have a swim and then come home and then I'd go back to sleep.
Yep.
And it would help me sleep. But yeah, these days I'll probably get up at 4 or 5 and I'll go for a run or a ride and a swim and then be back at 7:30 or 8 to get the kids ready for school. My wife works as a nurse, so she often starts early and works odd hours. So I take the kids to school and then that's probably the only exercise I do is usually in the morning, because in the afternoon I come home and I've got household jobs and other stuff to do.
Wow, though. I mean, that's really great, though. I mean, see, there's the problem. That's why I'm not an elite athlete like you. I can't get up at 4 a.m. in the morning. That's
you get used to it. I did go through a stage where I wasn't getting up early, and then I found it after a few mornings or probably a week or so of sleeping in till 7 o'clock. I found it really hard to go back to the 5 or 4:30 starts for a couple of days. But once you get used to it, it becomes easier. Once you get your mind, if you go to bed knowing you're getting up at 4 in the morning and you're going to go running or something, you're out of bed and you've got your shoes on before you actually think about what you're doing.
Yeah.
And that makes it a bit easier than if you're not as routine, if it's not as regular part of your routine, and you have to actually think about what you're going to do, it makes it a bit harder.
Thank you very much to Peter Hancock for taking so much time out of his afternoon to have a chat. If you'd like to find the links to Pete's Instagram, Strava and Twitter, then get over to the website at www.thepodpodcast.net. That's www.thepodpodcast.net. Thanks again, Pete. My name's Mark West. I'll catch you next time on The Pod.